Hi guys, people have asked me a number of times, when will the UK rejoin the EU? Well, while that question was very difficult to answer before the election, it has become somewhat easier now. However, there are a number of factors that will work for and against the UK in its dealing with Europe, which may speed up or slow down its re-entry to the bloc. In the last few days, David Lammy chose to visit Germany immediately after being appointed, not the US, which is a good sign. And Starmer has appointed the opposite of a Brexit minister. This means, at least on the surface, some of the foundations are being put in place to improve relations. But as pointed out here by Barnard, while Europhiles in Britain will be happy with the change of government, the EU is still dealing with the scars of Brexit.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because on the one hand, as you say, the expressed ambition by the Labour Party is really pretty limited. What we are told is that they want to do a veterinary agreement, they want to do something on recognition of qualifications and something on touring artists. Nice, but scarcely shifts the dial on improving our relations. More interesting is to talk about a security pact. Now, that it could be all things to all people, because security pact's pretty broad. It can cover defence, foreign policy, but before you know it, it could also cover things like defence procurement, and then you start butting up against the single market, the very thing that Keir Starmer says he doesn't want to rejoin. And the pressures will be different. We got so used to talking about the ERG, remember the European Research Group, who held so much sway over the debate in 2018, 2019. But now what we're seeing is business actually beginning to put its head above the parapet to say, we actually want more and we want better relations with the EU.
Given everything that's going on in the EU, given the rise of the right, the hard right, the far right, depending on which party you're talking about, given the chaos in France, but, you know, it's not just France. We've seen political instability in Spain, in Germany, in Italy too. Is there any appetite from the EU to go back to the bad old days of negotiating with Britain?
No, the EU and certainly crucially the key officials in the European Commission still bear the scars of the Brexit negotiations and are very reluctant to engage in anything like negotiations with the EU. That said, it's not just the Commission, but it's also the politicians. And the politicians know it's quite important to keep the UK on board, especially a UK which I think has been quite striking over the last few days, has been making very positive sounds towards Europe. We've seen David Lammy, the new Foreign Secretary, going to Germany. We've seen Nick Thomas-Symonds going to Brussels and talking to UCMIS, this fantastic acronym, that's a UK mission in Brussels. There's clearly an appetite to engage very positively. And I think that's quite a positive start. The mood music is better. We're no longer flinging mud at the EU, but we're actually talking to them like grown-ups.
Which is wonderful, finally. Now, there's also the possibility that a future Conservative government may see that, well, you know, we can't actually go back to the bad old days of Brexit. You know, the Labour government have put in place measures to improve relations. We better not try and sour those relations. Now, politically, things can improve between the UK and the EU. You know, as was pointed out here, the European Commission has been burnt by Brexit, and that's going to take some time to heal, but at least the mood music is better. And it's important to remember that, you know, the EU is not going to flip like a switch. It's going to take time. And as was pointed out, there are a lot of EU problems that are internal at the moment. There is risk to the EU actually falling apart. I don't think that's actually going to happen, but there are risks with what's happening in Ukraine, Hungary, and certain countries like Italy and maybe France at the moment. So there are concerns about internal issues. And of course, the EU does not want to take on the problem of the UK, where negotiations could be difficult. Now, trade is also an issue that needs to be resolved. And what's not mentioned here, of course, is dynamic alignment, which is really important when it comes to Northern Ireland. So that the relationship between Ireland and Great Britain could be improved. The island of Ireland and Great Britain could be improved, because if instead of going the way that Brexiteers wanted, diverging from EU standards. If the UK instead converges with EU standards, aligns itself with EU standards, it will reduce some of that trade friction. Now, of course, remember, the UK will not be, Great Britain will not be part of the single market, Northern Ireland is, but at least aligning with standards will help put in place measures to reduce some of that friction. And of course, in the long term, it makes it much easier to rejoin the single market after rejoining the EU. Now, Labour have, of course, dealt with this Brexit problem much better than the Conservatives. You know, when it comes to David Lammy going to Germany and a new anti-Brexit minister. But it's important that they listen to business, not listen to the likes of the ERG, which the Tories were doing before. They need to listen to business because business is dealing with the problem on a day-to-day basis. They're trying to import goods, they're trying to export goods. They know the problems that Brexit is imposing upon Britain. So it's important that the new government listen to business. And I imagine things are happening behind the scenes where they're listening to traders, asking them, what's the problem? What can we try and help with? Let's try and organize meetings with Brussels to try and resolve some of these things. Now, remember, being outside the single market means that you're not going to get rid of these problems, but you may be able to reduce the effect of some of them. And of course, as I keep saying, the UK rejoining the European Union is a bit like a united Ireland. We're not going to see it all happen in one go. We're going to see it happen over a number of years. So dynamic alignment, better agreements with the European Union, for example, as was mentioned here with defence, agreements in different areas, and rejoining organisations that the UK used to be part of. This will, in a sense, eliminate Brexit bit by bit and eventually put in place measures that will almost be like being a member of the European Union. And then it could hopefully become just a formality. Now, whether that would require a referendum or not is a political issue, not a European one, in the sense of being a member of the European Union. But we'll have to wait and see that. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.